Okay, now we're going to move on to the cognitive view. What I'd like you to think about is the cognitive view could be kind of like cogs in your head. Cogs are wheels, and the wheels are turning inside your brain, and you are thinking. The cognitive view is all about thinking. So, cognitive models focus on the thoughts, beliefs, and expectations and attitudes that may underlie abnormal behavior. I think we'll just, yeah. Uh, Cognitive models suggest that our interpretations of the events and not the events themselves determine our emotional states. So, for example, someone breaks up with you. It's not the actual breakup that determines how you think. It's how you believe about yourself, previous experiences with relationships, what you think about that person who's just broken up with you. That determines your emotional state. If you say, I can't go on without that person, then your emotional state is going to be devastation. If you say, well, this is probably for the better because we really didn't get along that well, then your emotional state might be some sadness, but possibly also some relief. So it's what you tell yourself about the event that determines your emotional state. So cognitive models use information processing concepts to determine human cognition and understand it, and psychological disorders as a disturbance in these processes. Probably one of the most famous cognitive psychologists was Dr. Albert Ellis, and he believed that irrational beliefs foster negative emotions and maladaptive behavior. So he wanted us to have rational and logical and self-enhancing beliefs. And he used something called the ABC approach to explain the causes of our misery. He also developed rational emotive behavior therapy. And I'll talk more about the ABCs of cognitive therapy soon. Another really prominent cognitive theorist was Aaron Beck, who's still alive. And he said we have four basic types of cognitive distortions that contribute to our emotional distress: selective extraction, overgeneralization, magnification, and absolutist thinking. So I'm not going to expand on every one of those. This is just an overview of the cognitive approach. But if you're interested in these things, you can look at them more in your textbook. So again, using the format of what do they focus on, what do they believe, and how do we change behavior. The cognitive view focuses on thinking patterns developed from exposure to the thinking of our role models. So let's just pause and think about that for a second. Who have been your role models? What kind of thinking do they have? Have you been around optimists, pessimists? Have you been around people that have intrinsic motivation? They're self-motivated. Or have your role models been extrinsically motivated? They only do things if they are rewarded by some tangible reinforcement. Have your role models had self-enhancing thinking where they express the positive thoughts that they're having in their heads? Or have your role models had self-defeating thinking where they say things like, you can never get ahead, I can never get a break, this world is falling apart, you know? So think about your role models and how they've affected your thinking. So to reinforce that, cognitivists believe that we have either self-enhancing or self-defeating thinking, and that determines your mental health. Self-enhancing thinking, for example, about our class. I believe that if I follow the guidelines set out by Professor Cooler, that I'm going to master this class, possibly even earning an A. Self-defeating thinking is, this is all too confusing and I can't possibly do all this stuff. I don't even know if I can hang with this class. I might have to drop. Okay, so that's the dramatic difference between self-enhancing and self self-defeating thinking. And you can see where the self-defeating thinking might lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy of, I thought in that way, I told myself I wasn't going to succeed, and then I didn't succeed. And there's a tiny bit of positive feeling that happens when you tell yourself, I was right, even about a negative outcome, like having to drop the class. Don't drop the class. I will help you guys. We can do this. Okay, so to change our thinking, we must use cognitive restructuring, and that's a process of replacing those illogical, irrational, and self-defeating thoughts with logical, rational, and self-enhancing thinking. So to change our thinking, cognitive restructuring is as simple as the ABCs. An example of cognitive therapy is systematic desensitization, and we will talk more about that. So, cognitive restructuring is said to be as simple as the ABCs. A is whatever activating event happened, anything, any stimulus, any experience that you have can be the activating event for your belief about that event to kick in. And based on that belief, you have an emotional consequence. So an example is activating event, someone you care about dies. Belief could be life will never be the same without them. So emotional consequences could be I am devastated. Activating event could be somebody dies and you say, oh, they're in a better place. So your emotional consequence is sadness, but maybe some relief. Or you could say they're out of pain and then you feel relief. Or they die and you say, although I really care about this person and they were really important to me and I wish they were still going to be in my life, I know that that's not possible and I'll work to accept that. Then your emotional consequence is sadness, but with healing. So Beck's cognitive therapy utilizes cognitive restructuring and suggests that therapists challenge their clients' dysfunctional thoughts, try out new interpretations. So I had a client once that said that she believed that God was punishing her because her daughter got pregnant very young. And I had to work with her on interpreting that in a very different way. It's widely used in treating depression, and they use systematic desensitization for phobias. That is a cognitive approach, and I'm going to show you in class exactly what I mean about that. Okay, that is it for the cognitive view.